Welcome back to the show. I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Florencia Moynihan, and we met just a couple of months ago, but instantly I knew I had to have Flo on the podcast because she talks about rhythms, and you'll find out very soon what types of rhythms. So, with that, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, Flo.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Ina. So, I am a nutritional therapy practitioner and I'm a cycle tracking instructor. And yes, feminine rhythms are my main focus because for the woman who has been walking around, living, thinking, confused about what it looks like to eat, how to move, like what our routines should be. Honestly, it feels like everyone and their mother on TikTok is telling you like what your morning routine should be like, what your evening routine should be like. This is what you should be doing to cycle sync. These are the seeds you should be eating. Da, 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 da. Or if we're looking at the men in our lives, we're missing a huge piece of the picture. And part of that is understanding that your body contains these certain rhythms. And when you can learn to work with them rather than against them, that's where you have easy pain-free periods. That's where you have energy that lasts all day. You jump out of bed and you don't even think about coffee as anything other than like a treat versus a lifeline. That's where you sleep through the night. That's where you have clear skin. So all of these keys of like, or the fruits, I guess, of good health can really come when you begin to understand the rhythms that your body has. So I'm so excited to talk about it because I know for you, rhythms of creativity are something that you're
Mhm.
huge.
Yes, you're so right. They are very connected. And the thing that I love so much about what you do is that you take what already exists and you make it better. You, well, not necessarily make it better, but you help people actually use their cycles to their advantage instead of as something that's holding them back.
Oh my gosh.
So, the first thing that I would just love to know is how did you even become a cycle tracking instructor, a functional nutritionist, all of these amazing things? What's the story behind that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So for me, it was this like trifecta in my life of the my three biggest aches were, and truly like our passions come out of our passions. Like so much of our pain in our story and the things in our stories that we're like, oh, that sucked, can end up actually leading to great, great glory. So for me, it was this trifecta of having really, really difficult periods. Like I don't know how many days of school I missed throughout high school because the pain was so intense, or like literally just the bleeding was too intense. And then really bad stomach aches. So, like daily stomach aches that I would try any and every diet. I would try cutting out different things. I would try adding different things. I was vegetarian. I was carnivore. Like I did so many things to try and stop the constant pain. And this like underlying dilemma, this problem of really, really bad body image issues, disordered eating, and really struggling to understand my body as good. So within those three things, it really wasn't until like my mid 20s where I like learned how to track my cycle when I was engaged, right? So that's like a thing. I'm Catholic. When you are Catholic, you learn how to track your cycle as part of engagement, which is actually really, really
Mhm.
cool. They're like, hey, you should
It
know this
is.
skill and it's going to be really great for your marriage. And it wasn't until I learned it that I was like, oh my gosh, you're telling me that there's like more information, that there's data that my body is giving me, that like my periods aren't just a curse. Because for all those years, what had I been told? I'd been told, hey, if you want this to stop, easy, just get on birth control, which was something that I was not open to. Like the risks, the fact that it was just going to be a band-aid that was covering up my bad periods. But I was like, so what happens if I want to get back off? They're like, well, the pain will just come back and you learn to deal with it. So that didn't make any sense in my head. So it was by learning to track my cycle that I was like, hang on, there are so many other data points that were telling me that my body was asking for help and asking me for change. And then it wasn't until later on where like my disordered eating journey had really taken a low, low, low. I was kind of hitting rock bottom, that I began to understand not just food as healing, because I think for so long I had already been like more holistically minded. Being in high school and going on all these doctor's appointments and being like, hey, something is wrong, please help me. And then being like, your only option is medication that like you hate, made me be like, well, there has to be another way. And like God probably put something out there in the world. Like he probably gave us some kind of tools to use. And so using food as like medicine and having holistic remedies, it was something that I was already very excited about. But it wasn't until I combined, not only can you use food to heal, but food is a gift and your body is meant to help you. And it's not meant to just be controlled for its size. Like there's so many other things that you can be using food for to actually optimize your health, to support your body. And I really hadn't seen it that way. All I was thinking about was how it looked. So it was that combination of things that once I finally discovered it, I was like, stop, drop, and roll. Every single woman deserves to know this. Every single woman deserves that she to know that she's good and that her body has purpose. And that if it's acting out in symptoms, there may be a way that getting the answer can be a lot easier and a lot less painful than just like constant doctor's appointments.
Wow. Flo, thank you for sharing that story with us, first of all. I find it incredibly inspiring how you took your pain and made that your purpose. That is incredibly creative and innovative, and now you're able to help other people stop fighting against what God already put in place and start finding the beauty in it. Like, that's why your podcast is probably called Made Good. Like, you're made so beautifully already. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. And in that exact verse, it says, and that my soul knows very well. It's like we're supposed to work with our bodies.
Yeah. Do you know
Tell
it?
me.
Like, do you know it? That's always the question.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What an impact you're having on so many women. Thank you for doing this, Flo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement.
You're so welcome. So, what I'm also curious about is you are an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So, how is connecting your cycle to your work? Like, is there a relation there? How does that all come into play for you?
Yes. Okay. One way that I use to describe this analogy is that one, I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to this, is that you are probably terribly ambitious and you have a way of being like, I'm going to do this. And I learned I was capable of like working myself to my own detriment. Like
Hmm.
I like working. Like I got my first job when I was 18. I worked full time throughout all of college. Like I like working. And what I've learned though is that if that is like uncontrolled, if that is unchanneled, if that is something that isn't like given proper boundaries, I can very, very easily do the kinds of things that will lead to not just burnout, but like actual harm, right? Like when we talk about stress, we're not just talking about like, oh, yeah, that's like something that happens to us that we probably should be aware of. Like we're
Hmm.
talking about stress, we're talking about like a massive risk of disease, right? We're talking about an increase of different kinds of problems that we are all trying to avoid, but in the moment, it's so easy to just be like, well, I can handle this right now. I can handle it. I can handle it. But we're not thinking like longevity wise when we're thinking from the potential of stress. So, one way that I think about it, especially as entrepreneurs, is that like one of the things that we love is the freedom that we have, is that you can create your own schedule. You
Hmm.
can work when you want and not work when you don't want. You can have an idea. I love that story that you tell of you had an idea within 22 days, you had a brand new course and brought it to life, right?
Hmm.
The thing is especially with like femininity, the feminine heart, we have this like natural chaos to us, right? We have this natural like ebbing and flowing. There's this softness to us.
Hmm.
I like to relate it to like water, right? And then we have like the masculine heart is a lot like this like steady, sturdy rock, these cliffs on the shore. And so we have these waves and they have this steadiness to us. But the thing is with water, if it's like unchanneled or uncontrolled, it can lead to so much chaos. And so by you actually understanding the way that your body works and having some kind of not just boundary, I think sometimes the word boundaries can be so like boring or like, oh, like it's just like another therapy talk, you know what I'm saying? But it's having banks to the river because when there's banks along the river, that water now becomes one of the greatest life sources in creation, right? This is something that is clean, that is safe to drink, that like provides so much food, that like so much life can be built around, like entire ecosystem. So having this idea of like you have to understand the way that your body works if you are going to have that level of ambition and aspiration. I feel like it's a non-negotiable because it's going to make sure that your work will bear fruit rather than being like literally the root cause of the disease that you're struggling with later.
Yes. Yes. Ah, I love that analogy because all of our rhythms, it really can be like the tides of the ocean. Like all of this force, this amazing energy, but it can also be incredibly destructive, like a tsunami. It's the same source, the same element, but then it has these two completely different results. So
Exactly.
it's all about how you channel it. That is
Exactly.
brilliant. I love that so much. And have you ever had moments in your life where you've fought against those rhythms, even if you have the information? Like, I'm wondering,
Oh,
is this something that you always apply, or are there things that you still struggle with? Or, and if the answer is no, then what do
then you're
people normally
lying.
struggle with?
No, no, I would be lying if I was like, oh, yes, because I know this, because I'm an expert in these things, I never, ever mess it up. No, I literally like it's almost embarrassing, but it also makes me laugh. And it's important to notice that like this is my life. This is what I teach. I know it so well. And I also believe it with my whole heart.
Hmm.
There's like such a big difference between knowing something and really believing that this is what
Yeah.
is true and what is good and what is beautiful. And still last year I had like one week, one launch where I was like, I just like went pedal to the metal. I let it be way, way more stressful than it needed to be.
Mm.
And I worked with an intensity that did not, my body did not appreciate. And I
Mhm.
ended up freaking going to the ER with chest pains. Like I
Oh man.
literally had worked myself so hard and stressed myself so hard that I ended up wearing a heart monitor for like a month,
Hmm.
that they were like, hey, like, let's make sure. So when I say that, like, I understand what it means when if you're someone that's like, I'm intense, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. Like, that intensity is probably one of your greatest gifts, but you have to be careful because it can be a double-edged sword. And it might
Hmm.
also be like your Achilles heel, you know? This might be
Yeah.
the thing that can be your downfall, which is like the last
Hmm.
thing an entrepreneur wants to think about is like having to stop, having to like slow everything down, having to like pause, or having to burn things, or things like burning down around you because you weren't able to maintain it. Oof,
Hmm.
that's like an entrepreneur's nightmare. So
So
I
painful.
know it well. And that's also why I think it's so critical, because I think the entrepreneur, the pace of life that you live is very, very particular, and it's not like a typical 9 to 5, and there's no
Yeah.
one else really that's going to be looking out for you. Maybe you have
Hmm.
like a good roommate, maybe you have a husband, maybe you have like your parents are like keeping an eye, but like ultimately the thing about being an entrepreneur is like a lot of it's you, like you and your laptop. So you and your laptop can go into like the late hours of the night and nobody needs to
Hmm.
know. But that's why it's like if you can have the wisdom and the knowledge of knowing like what is good and what's going to have the greatest reward, it can really help channel those rhythms again, like we were saying.
Mm. That's beautiful. You're painting a picture of a lot of hope. Because
Mm,
when I asked that question, I was thinking, if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, I'm so intense, like
yeah.
I want to see success so badly. First of all, your answer was very peace-giving because it gave this perspective that there really is another way. So, if there really is another way, like if having amazing results as an entrepreneur and not burning yourself out to the point of going to the ER, like if that really is possible, what is one thing that someone could do to achieve that? Because I know that a lot of people listening to this, you're intense, you really want to see results fast, but it doesn't seem maybe possible. So
Yeah.
I guess part of the question is it even possible? Like, how can you be calm and live in a calm way and
Yeah.
see the kind of success you want?
Oof. That's such a good question. I think that well, I'm like, what do you believe? Like, what do you genuinely believe that if you take it to its logical conclusion, if you take it to its end, it's still sound? So
Mm.
I believe that nothing good can come from like just straight up chaos. Of course, good things. Let me
Mm.
see. Like, yeah, the ends don't justify the means. I believe that the ends do not justify the means. So
Hmm.
even if I get to help thousands of women transform their lives, have babies, clear up their skin, get their life back, but it's at the cost of my my health, my being a good and present wife, me like being able to be present to the people that I love, like
Hmm.
was that right? I don't think so. So the way that I want to go about something has to be logical, not just the what are we doing?
Hmm.
Because I think so often you can have like the vision in mind of like, this is what I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to do in the world, this is the people that I'm going to help. But it's like, okay, now let's think about how do you want to go about this? Because there's so many different ways. Like there's so many different ways to build a business. There's so
Hmm.
many different ways to help people. Even if you just think about like, are you going to be a product-based business? Are you going to do passive courses? Are you only going to do live teachings? Are you going to only do VIP days, like retreats? Like what is that you're going to do? There's so many different ways.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, any good business coach that you talk to, you'll be like, well, what do I do? And they'll be like, well, what do you want to do? Like they won't give you the answer.
No.
So first, I think it has to be like, yes, first map out the vision, like what are we working towards, and
Hmm.
then what are your non-negotiables on that journey? What are you not willing to sacrifice? I am
Hmm.
not willing to work on Sundays. Like for me
Hmm.
it is like 10 commandments, honor the Sabbath, like whatever I'm going to do, I got to get it done in 6 days of the week, because Sundays is for the Lord. I'm setting it aside. Like as much as I love to work and I want to like jump on my computer, you know how hard it is to have to be like, no,
You.
like I'm going to keep this Sunday sacred. And it's
Hmm.
not because my work isn't sacred, but it's because
Hmm.
it's a practice of restraint. It's a practice of
Yeah.
self-control. It's a
Hmm.
practice of being like, the greatest good is for me to focus this day on the Lord. And I believe that that looks very particular, and part of that is pausing my work and being like,
Yeah.
whatever I have to do, like it is so good, and it can wait right now. Like
Hmm.
this day is not for that. This day is for the Lord. This is for family. This is for rest. And like putting a pause and like having to teach yourself leisure, having to teach yourself rest, I think as an entrepreneur is very interesting, and as a
Hmm.
woman.
Yeah.
But so then, like, yeah, what else? What are your non-negotiables? Like, what are you not
Hmm.
willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
And what could it look like? Like, could I build a business that helps more people than I've ever even met? And I did it like before the hours of 6 p.m. Like I like closed my laptop at 6 o'clock every single day for the most part,
Hmm.
right? Or I like never lost sight of the people that have helped me in the past. Like what could it be? I think that's important to start with. And even if you're like, I don't even know if that's possible, like I bet you it is. So
Hmm.
thinking about the things that are unacceptable to you and the things that are like major priorities, I think are critical there, because that's how rhythms are built. Like when you are determining your own rhythm, um, obviously we have like these things that are like internally wired into us, like our circadian rhythm and like our cycle. But there's
Hmm.
also like you determine what your rhythms, like what your movement rhythms want to look like. How
Yeah.
often do you want to work out? Every single week? How many times? For how many minutes? Where do you work out? Right? A lot of that you get to determine, and it's based off of what makes sense in your life, what excites you, what lights you up, and what do you need.
Yes. That is gold right there. Not only is it hope-filled, but it is so practical
Mm.
because you're talking about the boundaries again, like setting up the banks for the river so that the river can flow in the direction that God determines, that you're not fighting against it and trying to against the current. Like the boundary that about getting your work done in 6 days. Like that seventh day is truly for rest. And it's restful. Actually the most productive thing you can do in the end is resting. So, what are some ways that you rest in a productive way where or rather, even the mindset behind resting? Tell me more about that because as a musician, like someone who actually encourages entrepreneurs to learn the cello so that they can have productive rest, I'm curious what that looks like for you and what do you recommend to your clients there?
Oh my gosh. The first thought that I had as you were bringing the cello back up is like,
Yeah.
in order for music to be beautiful, there has to be the right rests laid out throughout the
Yes.
music.
Yes. Mozart says the music is made in between the notes.
1,000%. So that is the exact same thing. I'm
Mm.
literally picturing like a music sheet and like sometimes those like half rest, quarter rest, like whatever it
Yeah.
is. And that you're like, okay, everything stops, but it's like, that's what this anticipation builds. That's one of the
Mm.
first things, right? When you are
Anticipation.
listening to
Yeah.
music and there is like a longer rest, this is where the anticipation grows. So I believe that you cannot be working at 100 miles an hour all year round. That does not make any sense. And
Hmm.
so it's in those rests too. So even literally, I think my Sundays are my most creative days because I don't let myself go sit and start writing or doing whatever, recording whatever.
Hmm.
And like the anticipation for my Mondays is so intense. Like the excitement to bring those ideas to
Yeah.
life and to like let it cook, let it simmer for the day. So one is like the idea that rest helps build anticipation for someone that is like averse to rest or averse to being told that there's like a specific day of the week that we don't do things, or I close the laptop at 6 o'clock, whatever it may be. Like having structure and strategy around your work, considering the amount of anticipation that it builds.
Hmm.
And then also like one thing that I talk about a lot recently, I've been talking about with my clients is that okay, when I was, do you have a dog, Ina?
An outdoor farm dog.
Okay, do you know what breed it is? Is it a
He
mix?
is, no, he's a long hair sheepdog.
Okay, amazing.
He's a
Perfect.
sheepdog.
Sheepdog is such a good
Yeah.
example. So when I was a kid, I was like dog obsessed, like to
Mm.
the point that I would like read every book that I could find and I would memorize all the breeds. I would memorize what they were bred for, like what their purpose is, right? We have all these different groups. And
Hmm.
I think it's a helpful thing to kind of translate into your own brain, which is that, for example, I
Hmm.
have a retriever. I have a golden retriever.
Okay.
So for him to be like, to live a fulfilling life and to be like worked to his purpose, it's actually really important that he do things like that. Retrieve. For
Mm.
your dog
Hmm.
being bred to be a sheepdog, it is really
Hmm.
important that he has the opportunity to herd.
Yeah.
For something like a terrier, digging is so important to them. And a lot of times we don't even notice what these creatures are made for and like literally
Mm.
what is wired into their system until we see the negative activities, right? A husky that isn't being worked enough and is kept inside the house will cause utter disruption, right? Until you're running
Hmm.
it every single day. A
Hmm.
terriers are known for tearing up your backyard and like making so many holes and stuff like that. Retrievers, they like to use their mouth so they can they can like do a lot of chewing, they can chew up your shoes, all that kind of stuff. So I like to think about it like, okay, if you were a dog, like what is like your specific thing that you need to get focused, and like it's an important outlet for you that if it's not met, you
Hmm.
end up kind of creating chaos and destruction in your life. So for me, something like, yeah, any thoughts before I kind of map out my next thought?
Well, I'm mind blown with that analogy, the creativity behind it, and then also how much it connects to your unique purpose.
Hmm.
Like when you're not living in that unique purpose, the thing you were made for, then it's energy sapping
Exactly.
versus energy giving. That's
Exactly.
that's that's brilliant. Keep going.
Yeah.
I'm so
Okay,
curious
cool.
what you're about to say
So
next.
so kind of like mapping that out, and it's like, okay, what are like my things that if this does not happen, if this need is not met, I end up becoming, for me, I might end up becoming really lethargic, right? I naturally think I'm a pretty high energy person.
Hmm.
I'm quite extroverted. I'm very loud. But if I don't have enough quality time of like play, if I'm not
Yeah.
doing something that is playful, it might be playing a game, playing pickleball, playing capture the flag with my friends. Like play is something that is so critical. When I think about my husband is extremely introverted. And so
Hmm.
for him, he's like, I need to have like entire days in the season where like if we went on trip after trip after trip, socializing with friends multiple times a night, he's like, there has to be a day where I don't talk to anyone. Like, and for me, I'm like, kill me. Like that sounds that sounds like punishment. Um, and so really just understanding the way that you are hardwired and what
Hmm.
does it take for you to be your very best and what are those
Yeah.
needs that need to be met.
Hmm. I'm almost speechless. Like that is incredibly beautiful. It helps you take your own pain and transform it into your purpose.
Hmm. Oh my gosh. You're so like think about like little you, like
Yeah.
high school you, middle school you, like the
Hmm.
things that really hurt, the
Yeah.
things that like where you felt rejection, where you
Hmm.
felt isolated, where you felt loneliness, and things that maybe you learned that can kind of like dull pain or can dull
Yeah.
shame or
Like the
can dull
coping.
fear. Yeah, the way that you were like learn to cope. But it's like, well, what was the original need? What did you like
Yeah.
really, really need? And sometimes like
Yeah.
even overworking, it's like where did you learn that? Like, did someone ever
Hmm.
tell you that like that's where your worth comes? Or did someone ever
Hmm.
tell you that like that the only way that you ever got attention was when you were accomplishing things? Or was the only way you ever got attention when you were acting out? I just think there's like so much to you. There's so many layers.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, of course your health matters. But like a lot of
Hmm.
the times you're not just going to get the answers for your health and like figure out what the root cause of your symptoms is until you also address like the matters of the heart, and it being like,
Yeah.
well, how did God make you? Like what at
Hmm.
your core, like little you, what does she like need to be well? What does she need to like know
Hmm.
that she's lovable and loved?
Hmm.
um it just goes so much deeper, especially for women. I
Hmm.
feel like a man would listen to this and be like, okay, obviously there's men that are very in touch with their emotions, I know that, but
Yes.
it's like, okay, like give me the answers. But for women, it's like you
Hmm.
often cannot get to the answers if you have these massive roadblocks up of like
Hmm.
ignoring either like how the Lord made you or like what you really, really need.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not only taking the physical pain you're feeling, but you're also looking at the emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at both sides, the pain and the good things that are happening in order to find what you were made for.
Yeah.
So what was so mind-blowing, like I don't know if you're watching the YouTube version of this or the podcast, but I went like mind blown with the moment that Flo said this because of these dogs that are not fulfilling their purpose, what actually happens, like the chaos that follows the pain that is being unaddressed. So if we're taking the pain we're feeling physically, we're going to go to the doctor, we're going to go try to find a solution to either put a bandage on it or find the root cause. Like we're way more in tune with our physical pain. But then when it comes to the emotional pain, that's also a sign that our purpose isn't being met. That what that middle school version of us or the high school version or even like the 3-year-old version of us was put on this earth to do is not being met. We have to look at both sides. And as a forever optimist, that is a very good reminder. I need to actually look at the pain points too. Um, yeah, and that helps us set up the boundaries so that we can have everything flow in the direction we're supposed to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And like you will get stuck
Hmm.
until you can answer those things. So for example,
Yeah.
let's talk about like circadian rhythm, right?
Uh-huh.
Your circadian rhythm is your internal clock. Your body is designed to work like clockwork. Every single cell in your body is trying to keep time. When the signals are off and that internal clock is off, your body
Hmm.
does not know like what rhythm it's supposed to be keeping. We have this like
Yeah.
cacophony. Imagine like 10,000 cymbals just banging at different times. It's like awful to listen to. It's chaos. And so that's where we get to see those symptoms of like really painful cystic acne breaking out on your period, right? That's where we have like waking up looking 6 months pregnant because you're so bloated. That's where we have like the chronic constipation. That's where we have like the weight gain that you're like, I feel like I look at food and I get like gain weight.
Yeah.
That's like what that chaos can end up looking like. And when it comes to optimizing your circadian rhythm, a lot of it is about having um, a certain cadence. There's so much of it relates
Hmm.
to music, a certain cadence to
Yeah.
what you do and when you do it, right? Your body is meant, the way that it keeps time is off of light. That's one of the primary
Yeah.
timekeepers. So, like
Hmm.
your exposure to light, minimizing artificial light at certain times, like maximizing sunlight at other times, those kinds of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
But a lot of the time, it's like, well, those are that's like it's really simple. Like honestly, it's like really simple. It's really straightforward. And one hurdle that women will have is their phones. Like it's
Hmm.
like, hey, past sundown, we gotta put the artificial light away. We gotta put the screens
Hmm.
away. And one hurdle that my clients will be like, but I'll be like, oh man, like I'm really still getting like stuck in a scroll, or like going to bed past before like 11 or 12 o'clock feels so hard because I'm so wired. And I'm like, are you in computer? Yeah. Okay, cool. We need to put that away. But even when it comes to something like phone usage, which I
Hmm.
think a lot of people are trying to be really, really intentional with, like we know about the social dilemma, like we know about
Yeah.
how these things are wired to hijack your brain.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but in that, it's like, what are you actually looking for? Like, because then we can just replace it. Like, let's just replace the habit. If you are scrolling on your phone late at night because you live alone and you are lonely and you did not get enough quality time with people that day, and you being on Instagram makes you feel like it's like kind of satiating that need of feeling
Yeah.
human connection, that makes so much sense. That makes so it's not like a it's not always a
Hmm.
discipline problem. It's not always that you're
Hmm.
lazy. It's not always that you don't want things enough, but it's like, what's the actual need? And so then it's like,
Yeah.
all right, let's build more social time into your schedule. Do you have regular meetups with your friends? Do you have a weekly community that you can join? Like what
Hmm.
can we do and actually not just get rid of something that is harmful to you, but replace it with what you really, really need and satisfy the need in a way that will bear fruit.
Hmm. Hmm. Going to the root
Mhm.
helps us build up those roots so we can have more fruit.
Exactly.
We have to go to the root of everything, whether it's the emotion or the physical pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
No,
can't be ignored.
that's so smart. Especially with the social media, like there's a lot of symptoms that we experience from other things that we're not addressing, that we categorize as lack of discipline or lack of willpower or anything like that. And there's books upon books written about it, like the book Willpower by Charles Duhigg. There is a lot to that, but we can actually save ourselves so much willpower and have so much more left for the things that actually are going to make a difference in your life if we go to the root. So that is so smart. I love that so much. And it's such a practical thing too. Because it's something that you can take right now. Like if you are someone who is always on your phone and that's not a very beneficial input, you'd rather maybe be reading, but it fulfills some sort of need that you're not really aware of yet. Just take this as a sign. Really go look at some of the roots. Are you actually getting enough time with your people? Are you having enough conversations? Which is very core to creativity,
Yeah.
is getting other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I am also curious if you have specific cadences in place to nurture your creativity so that you can really fulfill the purpose you were put on this earth. Like instead of being that husky dog who's not running enough or the terrier just tearing up the yard, like what have you put in place so that your rhythms can connect to your creative rhythms?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think I've always been like I've always identified as a brain girl, right?
Mm,
That's like where my gifting is and not super super in touch with my body. I like wasn't very good at sports. I didn't feel a lot of confidence with sports. I was like I can sing, I can play cello, I can think like I'm smart, but like getting into my body has been something that in recent years I found to be incredibly fruitful because I didn't realize how much like stagnation and even when we talk about like dopamine, right?
yeah.
As someone who can either focus way too hard or not enough like for the life of me, learning to understand and of like negative emotions of it being like do I like just think through them or do I know how to like move them through my body, right? Emotion, like helping that move through. And so sometimes there's the reality of like there's creativity. A lot of times, like going on a walk is going to be like some of the most creative parts. So getting to look at seasons where I've been super, super creative and being like, what was different there? Seasons where I feel really, really stagnant and slow and nothing is new or none of these ideas feel good or feels like I'm forcing it. It's like
Hmm.
what's missing. I think a lot of the times movement has been a massive, massive key there. So
Hmm.
having rhythms of movement, walking is like a non-negotiable. Strength training is really fun. I've picked up a little bit of running lately, just because I'm like, let's just go. Like it really is like the opposite of an athlete. That they're like, I had my friends last night. We were talking about how I'm doing my first turkey trot this week, and
Fun.
just like a quick little Thanksgiving 5K. And they were like, oh, great. My athlete friends, their first question is always like, oh, is there a certain time that you're going for?
I was
Right.
just thinking that.
Oh my gosh. What kind of sport did you play?
I was a dancer for 15
Okay.
years and then
Yes.
lots of running and strength training.
Yes. So for you guys, you're like, oh, I know what it's like to strive for a particular outcome because
Hmm.
like there's a certain level of competitiveness that is tied to sport for you. For
Yeah.
me, it's always just like this is fun. Like I'm like I think it's fun. It's funny to do stuff with my body because if for in my head it never connected to competition. So
Mm.
having things like that of like movement and then a second one is sleep. Like
Mm-hmm.
ain't nothing good gonna come out of your sweet little brain if you are not
Yes.
sleeping.
Yes.
And I think even thinking about like the glymphatic system. So one way that
Mm.
I've seen it be, who is it? It's Matthew. Oh my goodness. He's like the expert in sleep study. He wrote Why We Sleep, but he has this analogy. Have you read that one?
I think so.
Matthew
I'm pretty
Walker,
sure
I want to
I've
say.
read some of his books. Yeah.
Yes, he's like the sleep guy. He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he teaches it in a way that's very, very to understand, very easy to understand.
Hmm.
But one way that he describes it is that like when you sleep, it's almost as if, you have those like big street sweeping trucks that come throughout your city. So imagine like a
Yeah.
dirty downtown, and at night everyone goes to sleep and you have those trucks. But not only do those trucks come through and clean out all of the gunk, which your brain needs to get cleaned out every single night, but imagine if this all the skyscrapers and all the buildings were able to shrink, and all of that street cleaning was able to get done so much more easily. If kind of a
Hmm.
similar process happens within your brain, right? Certain things kind of almost start to shrink and make room so that the lymphatic system can go through, clean everything out, dump it, and you have a fresh start. So this is where if you're not sleeping enough, even if you're someone who like is like,
Hmm.
oh, but I have so many ideas that I stay up until 2 a.m. getting them done. It's not just about how much you sleep, but it's about when you sleep when it comes to your circadian rhythm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that you're like, well, I'm getting 8 hours. I'm sleeping from midnight to 8 a.m. It's not the same. It is not the
Yeah.
same. There's certain processes in your body that need to run at certain times because that's
Hmm.
how that circadian rhythm works.
Hmm.
Um, so optimizing sleep, I think, is something that is critical. If I notice
Yeah.
that my sleep has been lacking or I've been getting a little too social or something like that, then it is one of the first things that needs to be checked because you can literally feel the difference inside of your brain. And like the
Hmm.
ideas just don't come the same.
Exactly. In fact, your REM sleep that happens or rather the REM sleep at the very end of the night is when people who sleep enough actually can create new songs. They write poems, they write books in their sleep.
Oh gosh.
Like that's we were talking about earlier today, the productive rest phenomenon. Maybe it was even in this podcast.
No,
I might
mention
be
it.
mixing up our
Yeah.
conversations, but
Yeah.
the productive rest. If you sleep enough at the right times for your chronotype or for your circadian rhythm, then that REM sleep is when idea generation will actually start. The
Mhm.
first 30 minutes after you wake up is when it's ideal to actually start brainstorming because your brain is in a slightly groggy state. One author called it groggy greatness,
Oh,
where you
yeah,
have
that's
your
good.
most brilliant ideas early, early, early in the morning. Now, you also have a spike in cortisol relatively early in the morning, and this will help you like want to just get stuff done. It's important to connect the two. Like you can actually connect what Flo is talking about with the like sleeping enough, then idea generation comes, and then the cortisol spike to get the most important things done, the things that are going to fulfill your purpose. Um, and then put those boundaries in place with like shutting your laptop at the right time so that your brain can actually slow down and the blue light. Yeah, that's so smart. Flo, this was so insightful. I'm finding more and more connections in our work, and I knew that this would happen, so I'm gonna just have to have you on the podcast again. We'll just have to continue this conversation because this was truly such a highlight of my day and of my week. Honestly, this is like the best meeting. Truly, I'm so grateful for you. How can people find you and
Yes.
hear more of your brilliant brain?
Yes, yes, yes. Three main places. Instagram at the Catholic Nutritionist, which I always say that we serve Catholic women primarily, but not exclusively. So it's not something sometimes people are like, do I have to be Catholic to look at your stuff? No, you're just going to get a nice little extra boost of the Lord. Second thing is the CatholicNutritionist.com. And then third is my podcast, which is the Made Good podcast on Spotify and Apple. I had so much fun. Honestly, Ina, it's so much fun. Like it feels like being in conversation with you gets the creativity
Mm,
running. So I just want to affirm and encourage that I do think that you're on the right, and
mhm,
that pivot was the right choice because the
mm.
way that you talking about creativity is making me feel more creative is
I'm
like
so glad.
literally energizing. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Flo. And thank you to everyone who came to the end of yet another podcast episode. Until next time, make sure to live your most creative days out.